Our top focus in WION Dispatch today. Boris Johnson has resigned as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, bringing his scandal-plagued tenure to an end after less than 3 years. Johnson also said that he would continue to serve as the Prime Minister until his Conservative Party selects a new leader. Listen in.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Brodie, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time, thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019. And of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And let me say now to the people of Ukraine that I know that we in the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes. And at the same time, in this country, we've been pushing forward a vast programme of investment in infrastructure and skills and technology, the biggest in a century, because if I have one insight into human beings, it is that genius and talent and enthusiasm and imagination are evenly distributed throughout the population, but opportunity is not. And that's why we must keep levelling up, keep unleashing the potential of every part of the United Kingdom. And if we can do that in this country, we will be the most prosperous in Europe. And in the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much, and when we have such a vast mandate, and when we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls, even in mid-term after quite a few months of pretty relentless sledging, and when the economic scene is so difficult domestically and internationally. And I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services. And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support as I can. And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks. I want to thank Carrie and our children and all members of my family who have had to put up with so much for so long. I want to thank the peerless British civil service for all the help and support that you have given our police, our emergency services, and of course our fantastic NHS who at critical moment helped to extend my own period in office, as well as our armed services and our agencies that are so admired around the world, and our indefatigable Conservative Party members and supporters whose selfless campaigning makes our democracy possible. I want to thank the wonderful staff here at Chequers, here at Number 10, and of course at Chequers, and our fantastic prop force detectives, the one group, by the way, who never leak. Above all, I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on. Being Prime Minister is an education in itself. I've travelled to every part of the United Kingdom, and in addition to the beauty of our natural world, I found so many people possessed of such boundless British originality and so willing to tackle old problems in new ways that I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
As we've been reporting on WION, it wasn't exactly a magnanimous departure or a grand departure. Boris Johnson was left with little choice but to step down. Though he did intend to stay and fight till the last minute, but the avalanche of resignations from government ministers continued through to Thursday. Letter after letter criticised the scandal-hit leader and implored Johnson to step down. Boris Johnson's departure marks a remarkable downfall for a Prime Minister who was once seen as having political superpowers. With an appeal that transcended traditional party lines, he won a historic victory in December 2019 on the promise of delivering a Brexit deal and leading the country to a bright future, as he said, outside the European Union. Boris Johnson was perhaps the most famous politician to enter Downing Street as Prime Minister, having forged a successful career as a journalist, a novelist, a TV personality and, of course, the London Mayor in the preceding decades. But his premiership unravelled in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. The most immediate cause of the demise of his leadership was a fallout from Partygate scandal. And then, of course, the Pincher scandal. Johnson's botched-up handling of a scandal surrounding a government official who is alleged to have groped two people at a dinner last night, essentially sexual misconduct. But Johnson has faced numerous other scandals that have hit his standing in the polls. Despite his 80-seat landslide general election victory, accusations include using donor money inappropriately to pay for a refurbishment of his Downing Street home, and ordering lawmakers to vote in such a way that would protect a colleague who had breached lobbying rules, and many more. Now, to discuss the way forward for the United Kingdom, joining us now is Mark Brolin from London. He is a geopolitical strategist and economist and author. Mark, thanks for joining us. It has finally happened. This was expected, of course. Boris Johnson has resigned as a UK Prime Minister. His speech was brief, but many say that his departure from office won't be quite so swift. What do you make of his speech, and what does it mean for the British people?
Well, the astonishing scenes from London yet again, as it has been the case over the last couple of years. There has also been quite a bit of Shakespearean drama over the last weeks, as possibly can be expected. And I think all the scandals you mentioned before, all politicians are experiencing lots of scandals, and many of them have played up by his enemies. You also mentioned the coronavirus episode. I think we can see that his party has turned against him, and especially so two factions. We have the Remain faction, who exact revenge, and they have joined forces with the anti-COVID lockdown faction. And these two factions within his party, they are now exacting revenge, and they have sort of trumped up the scandals surrounding Partygate, for example, because I'm not sure so many people think that it is a resignation matter with his piece of cake and his sort of beer during lockdown, but they trump it up and moralize surrounding it so they can now do him in, as was happening today.
Right,
so when you... Yeah.
Right, just talking about Johnson's legacy, if I may use that word, scandal after scandal, but he was infamous for surviving multiple scandals. His popularity swayed between extremes, some would say. He leaves behind a crippling cost of living crisis. Europe is still seeing the ramifications of the Ukraine war. What lies ahead for the UK after this political upheaval?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this sort of symbolizes how unforgiving politics is, because he has been quite popular around coronavirus and also his handling of the Ukraine crisis, and also Brexit. He had a party behind him. But now we have the cost of living crisis, and he's not on top of that to the same extent that he had been on the other big stuff. And there we see that the party has turned against him. He's now he's seen as a liability in his party instead of an asset. So. But the interesting thing here analytically is that we can't see that any of the rivals, the candidates now going to take over, they're not standing out to such a big degree compared to Boris. So that will be a big fight over the cost of living crisis. But that's, of course, the key thing now. The party has to be on top of the cost of living crisis. Otherwise, they will lose the next election. So this is what this is actually all about, the cost of living crisis now. And, of course, it will be very bitter for Boris when he thinks he has handled the big issues quite well, and has actually support on those accounts. All the scandals, he has no support at all, of course. But when we say he get away with stuff, it's sort of it's not totally true, because he has got away with some stuff that would have deposed other politicians before this moment. Right. But when it comes to the Partygate stuff, it has been played up. Keir Starmer gets away with stuff. He has also had a beer, and he got away with that in a way that Boris Johnson hasn't. So it's a truth that has to be modified.
Right. Just a final question there, Mark. Johnson clearly said in his speech that he wanted history to know that his resignation was the fault of his colleagues and not himself. He referred to something, the herd, as he said. What do you make of this statement?
Yeah, that will be a very controversial thing. I mean, he's right in a way. The herd instinct is a powerful force, and he used to go his way. It was going his way when he took over from Theresa May. But now it goes the other way, and of course he uses that one. And his enemies and rivals, they will play up this term to try to depose him possibly within days, rather than, I mean, he wants to stay on until this autumn, but he might not be able to do that. And I think herd instinct will be a very, very important term in this game, if he will be allowed to stay for a few months or not.
Right, Mark, thanks so much for all those inputs, and thanks for joining us on WION at this hour. We'll, of course, continue to track what lies ahead for the United Kingdom. Right, to talk more about this scandal, we also earlier spoke to Freddie Gray, who is the deputy editor of The Spectator. Listen into his inputs.
I think sort of in sum, it was actually a fairly gracious speech. There's been a lot of excited talk in London, in Westminster, in the last 24 hours about how Britain is in a sort of Donald Trump crisis moment with a leader who refuses to go in spite of all democratic conventions. I think we heard in that speech that that's just not the case. He has gone. He's gone quite graciously. And we don't know the exact time frame, but it looks like it'll be pretty quick, because he's handing it over to the 1922 committee. And given the sort of lack of a functioning government at the moment, they will be keen to put in place a new leader quite soon.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.